Misfits. Midtown. Misfits. Midtown. Misfits. Midtown. Misfits. Midtown. Misfits. Midtown. Misfits. Midtown. Misfits.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome back, Misfits, and welcome back to a new episode. Today, we're starting a new series. Yes, we're starting a new thing. Yeah. I really like saying that every time we start a new series. But yeah, so we're starting a new series, and it's called Places You Should Know.
Yep.
And we're just going to talk about distinct places in the Bible that get mentioned several times or that we think are important and we might not know that much about. And it just adds context to the story. It adds a little pizzazz. And then you have a better understanding when you read the Bible of what's happening.
Yeah, a little more context and, like just more detail to what it means or just, just a little more knowledge.
Right. Of like even like history at the time of the Bible being written, but also like what it is now or what it's used for or something like that.
Or what it signified or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So today we're starting the series and we're talking about Nazareth. We just thought that this was just Holy Spirit said this is a good place to start,
Guess who's from Nazareth?
Exactly. Bonus question. Yeah. So we're gonna start talking about Nazareth. So we're gonna give you some geographical location info. And for reference, whenever we do talk about something that requires like a picture, right? Like we were talking about Ezekiel and the angels, or we're talking about a map here, you can go to our Instagram. And when we post the hey, we have a new episode post, if you scroll, usually there's a picture of what we talked about.
Yeah, we'll try to add a little more to it to give you some more context.
So you can have an image. Yes, exactly. So here we go. So Nazareth is located in the lower part of Galilee, which is a district in the north of Israel. It is situated among the southern ridges of Lebanon, the Sea of Galilee, and also Mount Tabor. This is really interesting. So Nazareth is set in a hollow area and it has mountains on all sides. I don't know why, but I just picture, do you remember? I know you remember, but I started that off wrong because I'm like, she's gonna know. But when like David fought Goliath? Oh yeah. And it says that they're both going down. That's what I picture. Like I picture this valley and then a bunch of mountains around where you have to like and like run to the bottom to be able to be on flat land.
Yeah. Like in order to get to it, you have to go down a mountain or something.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. That's just what I pictured. But so it has mountains on all sides. The name Nazareth means separated, which is just in the context of the life of Jesus and God being the Son of God, I'm like, whoa.
It's very befitting.
Yes. So it's generally supposed to be the Greek form of the Hebrew word netzer, Netser, which means a shoot or a sprout. Something that I wanted to add here, which I learned recently. I was like watching this video on YouTube and it was about the book of Genesis, and it was about the Tower of Babel, right? And how for the Tower of Babel, for you who don't know, what's happening is there's all the people that are trying to create the Tower of Babel, right? These are all descendants of Noah because it's after the flood. So all of these people are together and they want to go to heaven essentially, right? And they want to have all power and they want to be like God, and they essentially don't want anything to do with God. They're like, we can do it ourselves.
They want to do it,
right?
They want to be gods.
And what happens is that God changes their languages, right? Like basically now everyone speaks a different language, so they can't communicate, so they can't build a tower. But what's interesting is, which the guy was saying in the video, was that throughout the Bible, we think that God is always trying to unite things. Like he's trying to like that's what he does, is like unite. But what he actually does is come to separate.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Like if you have a bird's eye view of the Bible, he's constantly just separating the Jews from the Greeks, separating the Israelites from the Philistines, like there's all separation everywhere. And I just thought that was interesting because Nazareth means separated. Right? It's cool. Obviously, and let me just close this out so no one gets confused. God does separate, right? Because we are holy and we live in the world, but we are not a part of the world. But essentially what happens is God doesn't want us to be joined to people or to things if he is not in the middle of it.
Right. So like the unity should be with God, not with each other or things that we like or, other things that we make.
So my connection to Yadi isn't because like, oh my gosh, yes, Yadi, like I'm obsessed with Yadi and she's so cool and then I make her an idol. No, what we have in common is God. So
Right.
because God is the glue that unites us, then he's put in the rightful place, and then we each other are put in the rightful place in each other's lives as well.
Right.
But yeah, I wanted to close that out because it's like, oh,
Yeah.
he comes to separate, and then I move on to the next topic, and then it doesn't make sense.
It's not just like chaotic or anything.
Yeah,
like
he
that.
separated us anyway, and the Bible is over. Like,
It's more being separate, but
joined to him,
Joined to him.
and then through him joined to other
yeah.
people.
Like the reason he separated was not because he wanted to. It was
Yeah.
like to separate him for him, like to unite to him.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was interesting. I just had to share.
Yeah. No, that is.
Okay, so continuing, some think that the name of the city, right, Nazareth, is connected with the name of the hill behind it, and accordingly, they derive it from the Hebrew Nazareth, which means one guarding or watching. It is also identified with the modern village in Nazareth of 6,000 or 7,000 inhabitants currently, right, in the world. That's interesting too, where it's like the mountains and it's like guarding or watching, and it's like Jesus came from that, and then God is always guarding or watching, and I'm like, man, this is coming together. This is coming together really nicely.
That is the mountain.
My goodness. So interestingly enough, the city of Nazareth is not mentioned in the Old Testament. It's only mentioned in the New Testament.
Right.
That's interesting. I don't think I ever realized that before.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until we were doing some more research on this episode. And I was like, oh, it's never mentioned. So,
Yeah, it was like God's little secret.
Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah.
he's going to come, but I'm not going to tell you
I'm
where.
going to tell you.
Exactly.
I'm just going to tell you he's coming.
Yeah, but
And that's all you need to know.
and us being the Israelites, because, you know, they expected Jesus to be the warrior and be this whole, like, Roman soldier type of
Yeah.
person or whatever. So they do the same thing we do, where it's like you start imagining where he's going to be born, right? Like, what's the coolest city?
Yeah.
Where is he going to be born?
Yeah, like it has to be something
It
popular
has to be
and
like
like
something awesome.
super well known, and like heroes and warriors come out
It
of
has
this
to be.
place. And, you know,
Oh my God.
monuments are there and blah blah
yeah,
blah.
I bet they did that. So we know Nazareth, when we go back to the Nazareth of the Bible, we know it as the hometown of Mary and Joseph. Although we know Mary and Joseph had to travel to Bethlehem for the census, if we all remember
Yeah.
that. And then because they leave Nazareth, now they go to Bethlehem. And of course, Mary was very pregnant. And Jesus was born in Bethlehem, but raised in Nazareth.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that's why they call him Jesus of Nazareth.
Right, because if not, he would be Jesus of Bethlehem. With
Yeah.
even like saying it sounds weird.
Yeah, it's just off.
Exactly. But Joseph was from Nazareth, and of course the lineage always goes through the dad. And so
Yeah.
Jesus, even though he was born in Bethlehem, he would still be Jesus of Nazareth,
Right.
regardless. And then we see this in Luke 4:16, and this is in the NLT. The Bible says, when he came to the village of Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual to the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read the scriptures. So this is cool because not only, of course, it's confirming that he just went home,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he's
But
back home.
also that he went to the synagogue, quote, as usual. Like that's just something that he did.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's the culture he was raised in. So it wasn't that all of a sudden his ministry started and he's like,
Yeah.
now I will go to
Yeah.
the synagogue, right?
Or like now I'm gonna go read or do whatever.
yeah, I've never read the book of Isaiah, but today's
I
the
always
day.
do it in my room, but today I'm gonna do it in the synagogue.
Doing it in public.
And it's like, no, he always did this.
He been doing it.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
been doing it.
Yeah. So Jesus began his public ministry, like I said, in the synagogue in Nazareth. And Matthew 13:54 says, he returned to Nazareth, his hometown. When he taught there in the synagogue, everyone was amazed and said, where does he get this wisdom and the power to do miracles? Which is
People
great.
always are amazed.
Yeah, like, wow.
And we just read. He's been doing
so
this.
wise. But it's so funny because this makes me think of how potentially they may have never noticed him.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he was just in the background. He's Jesus, Joseph and Mary's son, whatever. And then all of a sudden, wow,
Yeah.
he's so wise.
It's like their eyes are open and
Yeah.
realize, like, wait, this guy's saying some pretty wisdomous things.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah, and so somebody like leaned over to somebody else. He's like, he's been here the whole time.
Yeah.
He's been this
He
wise the
read
whole time.
yesterday. Were you not here?
Did they not see him?
He was here last week on Tuesday. You didn't hear him.
You didn't for Tuesday service.
Yeah,
you didn't.
You didn't show up.
All right.
You were in charge of the muffins.
But yeah, it's very interesting. So it's believed that Nazareth had, at the time, of course, it's believed that Nazareth had a population of about 400 people at that time when the Bible was written and Jesus was there and
lived there.
everything, all the things were happening. One of the interesting aspects of this town is how people reacted to it being Jesus's hometown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can see where it's such a small town that everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
So for them to be like, Jesus is saying this? He's the one like sharing, and
he
so
did
it's kind of
miracles.
like I knew him as a little boy.
Yeah,
or
I
he's
seen
my
him in
neighbor,
diapers.
or like all these different things. So he's just like a staple in the town because everybody is, right? With a town like that size, that everyone just kind of blends together, or you just kind of get used to everybody. So
yeah, it's so familiar that it's just like, nah, I don't.
So when he
think
starts doing stuff that stands out, people are like, wait a minute, what's going on?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's as if you went from like not being special to all of a sudden being special.
But
that would have shocked. I think that would have shocked people.
Yeah.
Or it's like David, for example, right?
Right.
He's in the field. He's throwing the rocks. He's throwing the stones.
Yeah.
He's out here killing bears and lions without nobody knowing, apparently.
Yeah.
Because they didn't put that in the newspaper.
No.
And then
known
all of a sudden,
publicly.
it's like he kills Goliath and all these things, and it's the same thing, right? It's the same picture of like no one knew you, and no one quote unquote thinks you're special.
Right.
And then you're out here killing giants,
And all of a
it's
sudden
like,
it's like,
wait,
who are you?
But that's just my little brother. How did
Yeah.
he do that?
like he's out in the field with a slingshot. What do you mean he killed a giant? And it's like,
Yeah.
like it's not adding up. It's like, well, actually, he's been practicing this whole time.
Yeah.
He was just in the shadows at the time. Yeah.
And you don't like him, so you never went out there.
So you didn't
You
care
didn't
to
even
check
know he
in on
had
him.
a slingshot. That's
good.
what I thought. I was like, you didn't even know he was slingshot certified.
Yeah, you didn't know there were bears and lions and all that stuff out there.
Yeah.
You're just like, he's with the sheep.
Yeah, it's crazy though, because if he, like when he was having that conversation with Saul, if he hadn't said that, we wouldn't know.
Yes, right.
Right? And he
right.
only said it to credit himself, to give himself, like,
Yeah.
to back himself up and be like, yo, I can go kill this giant.
Yeah, like,
but like, if
I
he hadn't
have
said that,
some
no one would know.
receipts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one would know.
No one
He
was
didn't
out
have a
there.
phone to record it and put it on TikTok.
Yeah,
like,
there was no
we wouldn't
YouTube
have
video
known.
of him like, this is how you throw a slingshot. Grab 3 stones.
Guys, watch me kill this bear.
Look, he's coming, he's coming.
Yeah.
Let me hide
Oh
behind
my
this bush.
gosh.
Anyway, we digress. So yeah, we also see this before Nathaniel became a disciple. We also see him talk about Nazareth,
Yeah.
right? So
this
here's
is
another
the example where it's shown of
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
who is that? And like, that's a small town. And what are you talking about?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So first it's like we're just sharing like Jesus himself saying, you know, this is my hometown and this is where he's at. Here's where we kind of get some context from someone else. And we kind of hear about Nazareth from like someone else, right?
Yes.
And this happens to be Nathaniel before he actually becomes a disciple.
Right. Just giving all the sass.
Yeah. And we see this in John 1, verses 45 and 46. It says, Philip went to look for Nathanael and told him, we have found the very person Moses and the prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth. Nazareth, exclaimed Nathanael. Can anything good come from Nazareth? Come and see for yourself, Philip said. So he was like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Very disbelief
Yeah.
was his words.
Exactly. That's what I thought. I don't know what small town there is, right?
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
know there's like all sorts of random names for cities in Texas that I have no idea what they do or where they're from or whatever. And the one that comes to mind is like Poteet.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, you're
In the
from San
outskirts of San
Antonio or
Antonio.
Dallas or Houston. Like, those sound really big. Everyone kind of knows where they are.
Right.
Or what happens there or whatever. But it's like, oh, yeah, he's from Poteet. It was like, Poteet?
Yeah.
But who?
Are you sure?
What?
That town?
Why hasn't he moved out here?
Yeah.
Like, why is he
Why is he not in the city?
Poteet?
He still lives there?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like if you live anywhere in California other than like LA.
LA or like
you live in
San
this
Diego.
tiny suburb in the middle of nowhere. It's like, oh, like LA?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't live in LA.
No, he lives in.
Yeah.
Well, why would
he lives
why
in
would
like
not?
San Sebastian? It's like, what is that? Was that in LA? No, it's not in LA. Stop
No.
asking me. I
It's
told
like
you
50
it's not in
miles
LA.
from there. Why?
Is it like San Francisco or like Sacramento area? No, it's San
nowhere.
Sebastian.
Is it by
I
the
just
beach at
told
least?
you.
Is there anything good there?
Yeah, it's like, I don't even know where that is. It's like, it doesn't matter. He's coming.
Yeah. Like, that's not the important. Stop focusing on
Stop
that.
focusing on where he's from. That's not the point. My cousin is coming to visit me. It doesn't matter where he's from.
But yeah, I kind of like that. You know, you hear this name, and Nathaniel was just like, I'm sorry, what? What's going on?
That can't be right.
So, of course, we can deduce from his words that the city of Nazareth was kind of held maybe in low esteem, maybe not very well known, or just maybe not very significant, right? Like we said, it was a very small town surrounded. So, like, a lot of people didn't know about it, maybe didn't care much about it. Like, it's only like 400 people there. Like, you're not a city big enough, you know, you're not a place big enough. So,
Right.
it's not very significant, you know. We also found that some historians believe that the people of Galilee which is where Nazareth is, were like rude and a less cultivated class, and that they were largely influenced by the Gentiles who lived there and mingled with them. Because they had a lower type of moral and religious character, like they just had kind of this reputation, right? So this could be part of the reason why the, general population at the time thought that Nazareth was, they associated anybody from there to be kind of like this. And it could be why Nathaniel ended up saying that, right? Because that's what you hear. And a lot of times we go by what, population, popular belief.
True. Like you could have never been there.
Exactly.
And it's like, man, I heard that everybody from Las Vegas is like a little strange. Or, it's like, yo, you never even met nobody from
Everyone
Las
in
Vegas.
Austin is weird.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That kind of thing.
Exactly.
So yeah, it doesn't say like Nathaniel had been to Nazareth. He knew about it. And so was his comment. So, I mean, we can't say he was or wasn't, but you can maybe think he could have not been, and it could have just been like what was said about it, Right. So it could go either way. But yeah, Nathaniel's question definitely shows us that it was hard for some to believe that the long-awaited Messiah could come from a place like Nazareth, because that place just seemed insignificant to people of the time. Again, it wasn't, a big deal. So it just seemed like, oh, we've been waiting for the Messiah all our lives, and he's gonna come from here. Like, I don't know.
Can't be right.
I don't know if I believe it.
Right.
And I think we can compare the situation kind of in our current context when we see like a pastor of a megachurch and they happen to be from a tiny town or somewhere like in the U.S. like no one's ever heard of, right? Like they're from some town in Wyoming, and all of a sudden they're like in New York or LA, and you're like,
or it's like,
oh,
he's from Kentucky. It's like Kentucky.
Yeah, and it's like someplace you've never heard of, and it's like, oh, it's like a farm town or something, and you're like, what? Like this mega pastor who's cool and hip and has the word of God and all this stuff. So we can easily kind of compare it to something like that, where it just surprises you to know that someone could be successful or, be chosen and come from like somewhere where you don't expect, right? So like they could be from a small town or even a third world country. So really, no matter where you're from or how limited your resources might have been, that when God gets a hold of you, he can do anything through you. So kind of to this example, like it doesn't really matter where the person was from. So God can still use you and use the resources that you have to lift you up if it's your time, So in the same vein, like we can apply that to us. We can allow him and surrender to his plans for our lives. So it doesn't matter what your past looks like or where you came from, like God can still use that situation. So if you're from a Nazareth, you can still be used and he can still lift you up.
And you can still, you can, I think many of us, it depends. Like with all of this exposure when it comes to YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that, like we all think, me included, because I get caught up in the wheel of the world sometimes, where it's like if you are quote unquote successful by the world standards, like you have to have a platform, you have to have a mic, you have to be speaking on a stage, you have to be part of the worship band, or you have to be seen. You have to be well known. You have to be well known, and you have to be seen, and that's not always the case. Like I feel like some of us, because even though you don't have any like public notoriety where like you're on YouTube and you're, I don't know, Tim Ross and people stop you in the airport, recognize you. Like you still have influence wherever God has placed you. And some people will live in notoriety and some people will just live in obscurity their entire lives. But if God is working through you and you're submitting and allowing him to do what he's going to do, then you're still successful. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. In God's eyes, not necessarily by the world standards. Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't, because this thought of where I come from only matters in the context of our own minds. Yes. Right. Because petite might not be like a thing to me because I'm from Puerto Rico, but petite might be a thing to you, and it's like, yo, petite is beautiful. Yeah, you know what I mean. I know many people, and they are delightful, right? They have like a whole fair and this and this and this, and they have a huge mall, and God knows what else they have, right? But like, it just depends on the person's context, right? Yes. And in Nathaniel's context, it was like from there. Yeah, yeah. Probably never been to it. Maybe walked by it or something. Yeah. It's just like, I don't want to live here.
Someone said they visited, and they're like, it wasn't nice or something. Like, oh, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, like how I got robbed. Like the not the Good Samaritan, but the one that got beat up. It's like he's the one that got beat up in Nazareth, and it's like, I'm not going there. There's a lot of crime there.
Well, it's like when I first moved to San Antonio, I remember, not to knock on the South Side, but we just happened to be in the South Side, and they were doing all this construction. And I remember, I mean, I was young, but I remember my first impression was like, this is dirty, and it's like a messy, and like, I don't want to live here, right? This was one little neighborhood in like a specific time of the year. They just happened to be like tearing down this like grocery store and like rebuilding. So it was just a mess over there. And so, but that was my first impression, right? Like, I had been to San Antonio 2 minutes and I already was like, ugh, it's so gross. And now I live here and I love it and it's beautiful and, you know, it's got its things, but you know what I mean?
Like everywhere else.
But like, you know what I mean? Like, people come here to like,
people
like
love,
to visit.
They
love the Riverwalk. They love downtown. They love all these things. But had I stayed stuck to this idea of this one block of this one place, me thinking like, oh, this is terrible.
Right.
I hate San Antonio. It's so dirty and gross and I never want to live here. Then I wouldn't have been able to experience all the other things that it had and really shifted my perspective of what San Antonio actually looks like. You know?
Yeah. It made me think of, I think like a really good example of that is Las Vegas. Because like Nevada is like a whole state.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, but you say Nevada, people just think Las Vegas, but it's a whole state.
Like the only place you think of is Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's the first
But
thing.
like there's so many other things in Nevada to do. Like there's actual people that have actual lives and actual jobs, and it's not just casinos and strip clubs and whatever other insane things go on in Las Vegas.
That's like a 1% of the state.
Exactly. And that's another thing too, like even because it's called like quote unquote Sin City, right? So you think of all the dirty things, you think of the strip clubs, you think of the prostitution, you think of all that stuff, but there's amusement parks and nice hotels and like pools and all sorts of family events and shows
even in Las
stuff.
Vegas,
right?
Like a lot of people think, well, first of all, like Nevada is the state, so there's so many other cities. You don't have to go to Las Vegas. But even if you're like, I'm going to go to Las Vegas, but you know, it's so terrible. Actually, it's not. It's literally one section of the city.
Yes.
Kind of like our downtown. Like, hey, you don't want to be downtown because it's so like full of tourists. There's so many other places you could go. Yeah. It's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, it literally applies to, you can use this example, it applies to everything.
Any town, like city, anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Even the church situation was like, ugh, I don't like that church. It's a cult and they do this and they do this and they do this. I'm never going back to church. Bro. Yeah. There is 10,000 other churches. That literally sprout every 7 weeks.
Or even
like
even going in
the
like more specific, like you went to a church, like say on Easter weekend. Yeah. Oh my God, it's so busy and so crazy and they have a million things going. I don't like that. You went on the busiest weekend of the year.
You went on the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
On the church Super Bowl.
Like, how about you try a normal, like, Sunday in, like, June?
Right.
Like, it probably is going to be completely different, and you'll experience it a lot different, you know? But, yeah, even within the same church, like, you know, you go on a day that just happens to be a little crazy. You might not like it, give it another chance.
Yeah, it's good. I feel like this gives us a different perspective of like, oh man, everything is like this, or everything like that is like this, and it's like, okay, first of all, calm down, and just open up your mind a little bit. Yeah. Take your time, go through all the emotions you had, and then be like, you know what? Not every Mexican person is this way. Not every Puerto Rican is this way. Okay, I can calm down.
Right. Yeah. I can take a step back and give it another chance. But yeah, so in the same vein, like Nazareth was a small town, but it did rise to popularity because of Jesus. Like it didn't have significance before. People didn't really think about it before, but thanks to Jesus at this time, because he was from there, it did become more popular. And more people knew about it. And obviously everywhere he went, he was Jesus of Nazareth. So this quote unquote peasant town is now like diverse and interesting, right? Now it has a unique history, because more people know about it, and it was also a place that fulfilled prophecies, and it's giving the world the Messiah, right? It gave the Messiah that saved the people today.
Right.
So a lot came out of something that, quote unquote, is insignificant or unknown or whatever. And so kind of in the same idea, like just because maybe it had that reputation doesn't mean that's what it stays as well. And that's what happened in Nazareth as well.
Right. It applies to the town and it applies to the people. It's like, yo, you got a weird past. You got a past that you're not very proud of. It means nothing. He's washed it.
Or it just seemed like it wasn't interesting, important, significant. Guess what? Now it is, because you matter, right? Like, so that can apply as well. So, of course, we wanted to talk about Nazareth, not only because it's an important place in history, but also because it shows us that who you are and your purpose has really nothing to do with where you were born or where you're raised, like we were saying. So your quote-unquote hometown or the people you were raised around do not define you. God defines you, and the purpose of your life comes from him. So also, we need to know and keep in mind that the people who say know you from, like, say back home, don't actually know you. and they don't necessarily have authority to speak over your life, especially if they want to keep you in the same place. So this just goes for people who might have known you before you knew Christ, or just in a different journey, right? In a different place in your walk with God. Like as a baby Christian, you're very different than when you're 2-3 years in, right? If you didn't know Christ before and then you accepted him, you're a different person. A month ago, you were probably a different person. So don't let people from back home or who you knew before even, before something happens or you have an encounter with God or anything like that, like define who you are or try to pull you back. Maybe what you had been doing or who you define yourself
right? Because
as.
people, and this is not to say that everyone that's like quote unquote back home is
right.
This
is like a
person.
generalization.
This is very much a generalization based on this story of Jesus,
Yeah.
because this is what happened to him. But in my experience, people that are stuck and have not changed or evolved, or they've stayed the same person they were like now in their 50s that they were when they were like 15,
Right.
they don't like to see other people change, because when you change and you're different, you're calling, without even trying, you're essentially calling them higher and they don't want to go higher.
Right.
And
or you're
so,
emphasizing the fact that they haven't as
right,
well.
exactly, that
And
they
so it's being
haven't, and that
exposed.
that you actually have the ability to, right? And you're exposing the fact that they haven't changed and that they're the same person, and they may have the same hangups, the bitterness, the unforgiveness, or whatever bad things that we see in ourselves and things that we should outgrow. They just haven't outgrown them because they haven't done the work.
Right.
But when you do it and you show up, it points to their like, oh, I'm still the same person, and it makes them mad.
Yeah, it rubs them the wrong way.
It makes them
they're
upset,
like,
and then they start attacking
I want you on my level, and you've moved past this.
Right.
So that makes me uncomfortable, or makes me mad, or I don't want to talk to you, or whatever.
Yeah, like now then you get the, do you think you're better than us?
Yeah.
And who do you think you are? Why did you even come back here?
The attitudes and all that.
Right.
But yeah.
Like, you're a carpenter's son. What are you doing in medical school? Like, you can't be a doctor.
Yeah. Oh, you have a degree.
You don't even
now,
have
you
any
think
doctors
you're
in
so
your
smart.
family. Like, what do you... Yeah.
Yeah. Even the fact that maybe you leave your hometown, it's like, what, you think you're better than us for living somewhere else? Like,
Yeah.
I literally just left. Like, it wasn't anything. Like,
Yeah.
we're not even getting into specifics of anything I've done with my life yet, and you're already mad because I left. You know?
It wasn't personal.
Yeah,
like,
I didn't leave you.
I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
But you can leave too.
Also, you can call me if you're mad that I left. Guess what? There's a phone.
Yeah.
We can still stay in touch if you really want me. Want to know about my life. So anyway, kind of to your point, they knew Jesus as a carpenter's son and wanted to keep him that way, right? Like, that's who they knew him as growing up, his dad. So they're like, why are you trying to do something else? Like, you're the carpenter's son. And so because of this perception, they were kind of unable to see him as the Messiah and the Son of God. They had a very closed idea of who Jesus was, and so they couldn't see past that. And again, kind of like what we mentioned earlier, there was this expectation that the Messiah was going to come from kind of maybe a more important place and be a warrior and come like fighting against the Romans and everybody else. And so they seem like, this is a carpenter's son. Like, I don't understand. I can't put 2 and 2 together, right? Like, how can this guy be the Messiah we've been waiting for? Like, it just doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah. Let me just say, I totally understand.
Yeah.
Right? Because I see that in my own life.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I see that because I know me, right? And I know how disqualified I am to have certain things like a podcast,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
but then you're like, I fully understand where it's like you see me or you see somebody else and you're like, wait, but you were like this person.
Yeah.
Right? Like this person that associated with like being an introvert and I hated public speaking when I was growing up. Like doing essays and stuff made me want to die.
Yeah. Having to be in front of people.
Right. And here we are, like very involved in church and leading groups and leading people and having a podcast and going to speak to small groups and being on other people's podcasts. And it's just like,
Opening up a better lives.
who is she?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. It's the Holy Spirit. Yeah. I can't, it's not me.
Listen,
I'm telling you.
exactly. I was like, listen, it wasn't my choice
I
necessarily.
I wouldn't even pick this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't choose it.
So we're like witnesses number 1 here.
I fully understand where it's like, yo, that's a carpenter's son. He can't be the Messiah.
That girl
He's not
never
even tall
speaks
enough
in front of anybody. And it's like, she's got a podcast. That can't be real.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they wanted to keep him that way. And because of their perception, they just couldn't get past that, right? So you have permission to change and to become everything that God has called you to be, no matter how awkward that is, or how awkward the growing pains are, or the lack of support. Like sometimes you'll only have a couple people around you, but you have permission. God has allowed you to
Yes,
grow,
you have permission. Please.
and move forward and do things again, like things that you didn't think you could do. Like God will allow, if God opens that door and allows you and calls you to it, like you can do it.
Yeah.
He's gonna help you through it.
Yeah.
So here we are, like two people who are very much introverts, not big on like speaking in front of people. Not that we're speaking in front of people now, but like we know people out there listen to us, and sometimes that's like, ooh, that's a little nerve wracking.
This podcast is not real until someone says, "Hey, I listened to an episode," and it's like, "Oh gosh."
And I just want
You
to like
listened to
turn
an
inside.
episode. Oh man. What did you like it?
Yeah. So what's going on?
Yeah. What did I say? Are you about to correct me because I said something wrong? Like it's just a whole thing.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like it's very cool and so humbling and such a blessing to know like someone out there was able to hear a message that God placed in our hearts, and they were able to receive something, you know? So.
Yeah, because we just want to make it clear right now. We are sitting here recording this because God told us to, right? Yeah. This wasn't like I think we should, I don't have anything to do on my bored. Friday nights.
Yeah.
What do you say we just start talking to a mic and then hope something? No, like this is a God thing that God placed on our hearts.
Like I just want to
at
talk
different
so
times,
bad.
But it was like we're just being obedient, and it's fun, right? We do enjoy doing it. We're not doing it because He's forcing us to. But it was very much a God idea that we're just walking in.
And push us into like outside our.
But these aren't. This isn't who we are without God. Where we would have just come up with the idea of like, yo, I want to put stuff out there about my life and like talk about my testimony and the terrible decisions I made in the past, and then have people come and ask me about it. Like, no.
And I want to do episodes about stuff that I'm still learning and be like, God, you want me to talk about this? Wow, you really want me in the Word, and I'm over here like trying to study for a week, trying to like find stuff, because God's put it in our hearts to be like, I need you to talk about this. I need you to share this. And like, all right, God, like we got to get into it. So, things like that too.
Yeah. So yes, please, you have permission to change. And the growing pains will be awkward. I think growing in Christ and growing in the life that He's called you to lead is just, man, there's a lot of awkward parts.
Yeah.
Especially when you're growing and developing and you don't really know what things look like in your life, but even in your growth with reading the Word and prayer and all of these things.
Yeah.
But it's just part of growing, right? It's that weird, awkward phase where like when little boys' voices change, right? And it starts cracking and you have acne or you have braces, and it's just, there's awkward parts, and but it's going to be okay. And you have permission to change. Please feel free to change. Don't allow the people of the past or your background or where you came from disqualify you, because God has already qualified you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So good things can come out of Nazareth. Nathaniel.
Yeah. And he learned that, by the way.
He did.
FYI, if you keep reading, he becomes a disciple of Jesus. And so he understands, you know what? Something good did come out of
he's
Nazareth.
like, I get it. And because he was a disciple, he probably visited Nazareth a couple times. He's like, you know what? This place is nice.
Yeah. Oh, thanks
for
good welcoming me to your home. Did you make this chair? This is great.
This is nice. You're handy, aren't you? Wow.
Oh, this is what you did before. That's cool.
Yeah, this is cool. It's sturdy. Yeah.
Great job.
Yeah, that's a nice wagon.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what we wanted to talk about today. So we hope you learned a little bit more about Jesus, his background, a little bit more in Nazareth, and that you know that you have permission to change, and God has called you to it. And if you don't believe me, ask him and he'll tell you.
Yeah.
And read that one book, because he'll tell you in there too.
Yes.
And with that, this is Fran.
This is Yadi.
We are the Midtown Misfits, and we will see you next week. Bye.